Initiation by Elisabeth Haich, Chapter 37, Part 2. Once again I'm standing in the green meadow, and now I'm ready to go on. The air is fresh, the sun is shining, but still it's not unbearably hot. How strange! Never before have I noticed that it wasn't hot at midday, and now there's even a gentle, pleasant breeze. There's something more that's strange, too. As the mists disappear and I see the ground below my feet again, I notice that my feet, as well as the ground that they stand on, are much farther down than they've ever been before. That means I've grown much taller. How peculiar! At my age, a person doesn't grow anymore. So how is it possible for me to have grown taller? And what a remarkable dress I have on. It's really funny. And where are my sandals? And my hands? How very much they've changed. Everything is so peculiar. As surprising as if I were not myself. As if I were dreaming. But my consciousness is clear. I'm awake. I'm not dreaming. I look around. Not far away, I see a forest. And as I approach it, a house becomes visible among the trees. But what a strange house. The place seems familiar to me. And yet, I know I've never seen such trees in all my life. Nor such a house. No, these trees are not even remotely similar to our palms. The house stands on a hill, and as I go up the steps through the forest leading to it, I know the house belongs to me. But how? I've never seen such a house, and yet it's familiar to me. It's not made of stone, and its roof is slanting instead of flat. As I enter the house, I know every room is familiar. So I walk straight into my room. And as I step into the little room with its whitewashed walls, I stop before the window for a few moments to enjoy the magnificent view. I see that both the little house and the beautiful green meadow are high up on a mountainside, offering a view into the wide plain below. At the foot of the mountain, a broad river flows majestically, with big ships navigating on its surface. Singularly enough, they have no sails and no oars, yet move along very fast, much faster than our ships. Another thing I don't understand is why they all have big black pipes sticking up and spewing out thick black smoke. The sun has gone down, and twilight is spreading out over the valley below me. Off in the distance, where I have a strange feeling I've looked out before, there are many little villages, and between them and over them I see little flashes of lightning, again and again. And after each flash, there's a clap of thunder, just the way the thunder booms out of the Great Pyramid. I observe these flashes of light and this thundering for a while, until suddenly a shrill bell rings behind me. I turn around and see a little apparatus that is emitting this ringing sound. Lift up the odd-shaped part of the apparatus and press part of it to my ear. All this seems just a matter of course, as if I'd been accustomed to doing this for a long, long time. Yet I know precisely that I've never seen such a thing in my life before. And as I hold the little round black part of this apparatus to my ear, I again hear the voice. That voice that spoke out of the misty figure. I kiss your hand, darling. How are you? Thanks. Fine, I reply. But I'd like to come home. Could you perhaps come and fetch me tomorrow? The enemy is quite close. Every evening I see the hits. They're coming closer and closer with frightening speed. I'd like to be home with all of you. All right, answers the voice of the man again. I'll come tomorrow and I'll get you. But wouldn't it be more sensible if you were to stay in the forest? Here in the city, we're getting bombarded day and night, and it's getting worse. No, I answer. I want to be back home with all the rest of you. I've taken care of the house and the property here, but when danger is near, I want to be with the rest of you. Please, take me home. Good. I hear again out of the apparatus. I can see that you have courage enough. Tomorrow afternoon I'll come. I'll pick you up. Get all your things packed before then. Goodbye, my darling. I kiss you again and again. Good night. I kiss you too. Good night, I answer, and I put the apparatus back where it was before. Who was that? How do I come to hear his voice speaking to me through an odd-shaped apparatus? How come I hear him with my physical ear instead of through the inner link of spirit? A thought flashes through my brain. Is it perhaps I'm experiencing now only a vision? Perhaps it's only a dream, only a test of my courage. No, unfortunately, it's not a dream. However much I much like to wake up out of this reality, I just woke up before out of a dream, and I found myself in the midst of that beautiful green meadow. Yes, that was a dream, but now I'm wide awake and I have to deal with all kinds of things, unavoidably. The air is heavy with fear and terror. So many people can hardly breathe. The enemy is approaching from every side. If this goes on for a few days more, the city will be surrounded. And we keep hearing such unbelievably horrible stories from the refugees who've succeeded in escaping from the occupied areas. But we are in the hands of God, and I calm my anxious heart and nerves with the thought that everything that happens is for the good, because nothing can happen without God's will, and God's will is always good. Absolutely, always. I start to pack my things quickly. The next afternoon I look up at the window and I see our dog running down the mountainside like a streak of greased lightning. That's how I know my husband is coming. A few minutes later they arrive, my husband and our dog. Our dog is so happy. He jumps up to greet my husband again and again, up to shoulder height, out of pure enthusiasm and excitement. I run out to meet him too, and we embrace each other with tender affection. We've been living together for nearly 20 years and are just as much in love as the day that we married. My husband's bearing and manner, his voice, and his warm touch are all so reassuring. He is courage, safety, dependability itself. I hope you're not afraid, he asks me with a smile. No, I answer as I lace my arms around his muscular back. God will be with us. I snuggle up close to him for a moment, leaning my head on his broad shoulder. As we start to pack the luggage into the car, I stand still for a moment. What kind of car? Carriage or chariot is this? I suddenly remember that I'm accustomed to traveling in quite a different kind. But then I smile again because this one I know very well too. Of course it's my husband's car, but how strange that it runs by itself, no lions harnessed up in front of it. I stroke my forehead with my hand. Have I gone completely mad? Lions? Lions in front of a motor car? And here in this country? Yes, indeed, there were some beautiful lions in the zoo, but they were long ago put to death because of the bombings. It would have been dangerous if one of those wild beasts had been freed because of the bomb damage to its cage. I can't understand where I get ideas like this about lions and other impossible things. The pyramids of Egypt, which I certainly only know from photographs. Have I become a victim of too much excitement? We drive home. I run into our apartment. Just as I'm about to open the door, it opens all by itself, and there, beaming with joy, oh, how in the world did you get here, is little Bogar. But he isn't little anymore. He's grown up, even though he's still quite young. He smiles as sweetly as ever. He bows before me and kisses my hand. "Oh, good, how very good to see you home again, my queen," he says quietly. But I stand there looking at him in sheer astonishment. "Bulgar, you're here? How did you get here?" I ask. Now it's his turn to be surprised. "But you know that I've been living here for the last 3 years, in your house. Why do you ask?" I just can't understand it. He isn't exactly as I've known him. He's already grown up, and yet I know he's really still a child, or should be still a child. But why? Since he's coming from a faraway homeland. I just don't know him. And then he was already a grown-up young man. Why do I have this strange feeling that he's only a boy of 10 or 12? Why do I feel again as if I were dreaming? And here's my husband. The whole apartment is full of flowers. How sweet of him to welcome me home after all these years of our being married in the same way he did during the first few days of our honeymoon. After supper, we sit near a strange, fairly large wooden box in which a human voice is speaking. The voice tells us the latest news of the war, along with rules and regulations for us to follow. How strange. This is another materialization from a mental process, like the telegraphic apparatus up there in the little forest house. Ptahhotep, my dear master, also emits high-energy radiations through the atmosphere of the country every evening. All the people, while they sleep, are aided and strengthened by his powers and his love. But his radiations reach into the very depths of people's beings, not just to the outer ears like the low-frequency vibrations coming from this odd little wooden box here. Then we go to sleep. And in many of the nights that follow, we are suddenly awakened by horrible sounds. Sirens howl throughout the whole city. We jump out of bed, we slip on our shoes, warm underwear, house dress, a fur, a warm kerchief around the head. We snatch up the little suitcase with jewelry and money and the old album with the symbolic mystic drawings. We rush downstairs. My husband and I down into the cellar. On the stairway we meet my younger sister and her newborn babe in arms, her 3-year-old boy and 2-year-old girl. Other doors open on the stairway and other people come out, blanched and drawn and silent, to join us on our downward march. And as we reach the ground floor, a door opens and an old man with snow-white hair and a beard comes out. Those eyes, where have I seen those eyes before? And like a flash of lightning, I suddenly see the handsome figure of my father's general, the one who made such a fine career for himself. His eyes. And how has he come here? And how old is he? And how do I come to be whispering to him now? Father, dear, are you dressed warm enough? He smiles and he gives me a reassuring wave of the hand. Yes, don't worry. And we all go on to find our place in the cellar. And the enemy comes closer and closer, and the ring of steel he's forged around our city gets tighter and tighter, and one afternoon the door opens and Ima walks in. How does he come to be here? And dressed in this clothing? I embrace him and I ask, what kind of a suit is that? He looks at me with equal surprise. What a question, Mother, he says. What kind of suit? Why, Mother, you act as if you were seeing it for the first time. An Air Force uniform. But you've known that for a long time. I stand there just as confused as if I were about to be woken from another dream. Yes, of course, an Air Force uniform. And he is my darling, my only child. And yet, I know he's Ima. Of course I know him, Ima. If he really is my son, is he really my son? I can see him clearly in his priestly robe. He gave me lessons in concentration. Even then, his radiation was strong and clean as steel. I know him. But he doesn't know me, and he acts as if he never had anything to do with the temple. Mother, he says, my outfit is moving on to another place because our planes can't operate anymore from this airfield. If we stay here any longer, we'll all be destroyed with our aircraft. We're moving on somewhere into the countryside. I don't know when I'll see you again. My heart turns cold in panic. I've already gotten used to knowing my son was in constant danger. When he went into the Air Force, I felt as if I'd been struck dead. I walked around lifelessly in the apartment, feeling as if I were dreaming a horrible dream. How could this be a reality? How could mothers really be sending their sons, their healthy, young, vigorous sons, out into mass murder? It's certainly only a bad dream in which people have come so depraved, so degraded as to the killing of each other with the most gruesome weapons imaginable, and killing off precisely the healthiest, strongest, fittest young men who should be begetting a new, strong, healthy generation of people. These young men are the first to get killed simply because they're considered fit for service. The weak and the sickly ones stay home, and because they do, they are the very ones who become fathers. The majority of the healthy young men are killed off in the fighting. This is the fastest road to complete degeneration of the entire human race, and people have already sunk so low that they don't even recognize this fact. For no other reason than blind hate and fear of each other, people kill off the best and the healthiest generations. Dream, nightmare. Then, little by little, my sense of reality came back, and I turned my child over to God. Nothing can happen without God's will. Whatever happens is good because God wants it so. Compensation. Everything that happens is only a searching and a striving to return to equilibrium, back to paradise. These words of my dear master, Ptahhotep, and all the other things he taught me in the Great Pyramids made such a deep impression on me that this gave me courage to go on living and to go on doing my daily duties, despite the terrible realization that my child and millions of others were using each other as targets in this mass butchery. But now I knew that we would be separated when he left the city, for the enemy had us almost completely surrounded, and whether he or we would come out of this mass murder alive, or whether we would ever see each other again in this lifetime, these were just the big question marks. And still, I must not feel pain, excuse me, because I am not permitted to link myself with anyone in such a way that my happiness is dependent on him. In this young man whom I carried in my heart, in order that he might be born again, in this young man who is now my son, I do not love the body. It is not his physical manifestation that I love, but God within him. His divine self has built up this body, just like the bodies of all the people, animals, plants, and even inert matter, in order to be able to express itself. So it's the manifestation of the impersonal divinity that I love in my son's person, in his beautiful body. All of creation is the manifestation of the one and only God. So why should I now tremble about the possibility of losing this particular manifestation of God? Why should I shudder at the thought of not seeing it again? Perhaps because his flesh and blood are from my flesh and blood. But myself and his self are the same self, and not flesh and blood at all. I must go into my own self and become fully conscious of it. Then I am identical with the self of my son, and at the same time with the self of the entire universe. So I cannot lose anything or anyone. It cannot make any difference to me whether those who die are of my flesh or blood or total strangers, because the same self of God is changing one of its many bodies whenever a living creature dies. Whenever it's the body of one, of my one and only child or someone I don't even know. I must completely conquer my flesh and blood, which now feels such terrible pain. Oh, God, give me the strength to pass this test. Even though I haven't yet attained cosmic consciousness, give me the strength to act as if I were living every moment in this divine state of consciousness. My knees tremble as I go down to my son and embrace him, and I say, my dear little boy, my one and only child, farewell. I put you in God's hands. He won't leave you. He won't leave us. Just remember that everything passes away except true love. And even now, we love each other because we are one in God. This spiritual unity, this true love has brought us together here on earth. We can't lose each other. We will find each other. We will meet again, if not in this life, then in the next, or in another form of life. Wherever we may go, our love for each other will bring us together again. Farewell, my darling. In difficult times, to come hold on to this invisible power that stands behind us and never leaves us, the power we call God. Neither of us cries. We hold each other in a long, warm, loving embrace. I kiss his smooth young forehead. He holds me to his heart. Then he leaves. I wave to him from the window. He waves back and then disappears. Tonight, we celebrate Christmas. The cannons are thundering continually, but still we make all the preparations we can to celebrate the day as beautifully as possible. It doesn't matter much to me, for in eternity there are no Christmases, no holidays, no weekends. Every day is a holiday, a holy day, because in God eternity is everlasting. Holy day. But my husband likes to celebrate Christmas Eve. He's happy when he can give me pleasant surprises, and he likes to be surprised himself. He's already decorating the tree in the parlor, and Bogar is helping him. For the last several weeks, Bogar has been living with us. Even if he wanted to go home evenings, he would not have been able to do so recently because of the heavy bombings. He lives in the room that my son has vacated. Several years ago, Bogar left his homeland far away in the Orient. He came to the West to teach people in this part of the world the ancient science of his ancestors, which enables people to bring the body under the dominion of the spirit. After wartime shortages made it impossible to obtain stone or bronze for sculpturing purposes, my studio was empty, and I turned it over to Bogar as a room in which to give his lessons. From the beginning of our acquaintanceship, he acted as if he were our own child, and now he and my husband are decorating the Christmas tree in the greatest of harmony. I am with the cook trying to think up ways and means to prepare a festive menu with the food supplies that we succeeded in obtaining with so much difficulty. Today we've been invited with the whole family for Christmas Eve at Father's. Tomorrow we'll need to be able to serve a Christmas meal ourselves. Then the doorbell rings. My young cousin rushes in, all white and shaken. "Esther," he says, "the enemy has completely surrounded our city, and their troops are making a surprise move. They're not coming from the other side of the city as we expected them, but straight towards us. I was in the city with Father, and we telephoned Mother. She told us the enemy troops have already reached our villa. Their heavy tanks and men are moving towards the center of the city. Lucky thing the telephone lines weren't cut. Enemy tanks and troops will probably be here in a minute. Get ready. Now I've got to run. Goodbye." And with that he goes. And I run to my husband and I tell him the news. And then on through the whole house, spreading the alarm so that the sisters, brother, father, and the caretaker's family all know what we're up against. Our villa stands on the hillside. From our windows we can see far down the street in the direction from which the enemy troops are coming. Everything is quiet for a moment. My husband says it will be hours before the enemy reaches this vicinity. So he suggests that we celebrate Christmas immediately and then go downstairs to Father's, where we've been invited to join the rest of the family for supper. That way we'll all be together at Father's, and we can wait and watch for further developments. My husband lights the candles on the Christmas tree. I think of my son, who at this very moment may be obliged to take part in the air raid. I commend him to God's care. We all shake hands, exchange presents, leave everything lying where it happens to be, and hurry down to Father's flat. "Children," says Father, "let's eat quickly, for we may soon have to take refuge in the cellar." We sit down, and as has been the custom since my mother died, her chair stands at one end of the table, empty, and a candle is burning in her place. Thoughtfully, quietly, calmly, we eat our supper. We all feel that a solemn, somber time is coming soon when we will have to face our destiny. While supper is still in progress, a bomb goes off with a mighty blast right near our windows. We all look at each other. "Let's go right on eating," says Father. "Maybe we can finish supper." We eat as fast as possible, but the explosions come closer and closer and get more and more frequent. The doorbell rings. Officers of the Federal Army are standing in front of the door. "We're going to set up our cannon in the garden," says one of them, "and we're going to billet our troops in your house. Give us the keys to all the flats in the house." My husband gets to show the officers around. We hear a particularly loud explosion. The whole house is shaken as if by an earthquake. A few minutes later, my husband comes back. "Father," he says, "we better get down into the cellar. The garage has been hit. Our central heating plant has been damaged. We've got to turn it off immediately and drain out the water. Get below, all of you. Your lives aren't safe anymore in the flat. The enemy troops are very near now. The officers are saying that the enemy has already reached the other side of the street. The fighting won't last long, but we still must expect to spend a few days in the cellar." Thoughtfully and with perfect calm, Father says, "Let the women and children go below. I'm going to finish eating my supper. Please bring the coffee." We know there's no arguing with Father. My younger sister gets up and takes her baby in her arms. I take her little boy by the hand, and my other sister takes the little girl. Together we go downstairs to the underground shelter. My brother, my husband, and Bogar stay with Father for coffee. The explosions keep getting louder and stronger. Sitting in the cellar, we feel the house shaking in its very foundation every time. After a while, the heavy iron door opens, and the men come in. Stepping over to me, my husband whispers in a low voice that no one else can hear. "They're putting up the cannon in the garden, and they intend to defend our house to the very last. They refuse to give up the city. Our house is a key spot for them. If the enemy troops take it, there will be no way to stop them from here. Right down to the river, we can expect they'll fight to the very last man. I only hope it won't last long. The city is completely surrounded, and any further resistance will simply entail senseless destruction. I'm going to get the janitor to help me bring down our mattresses so that we can get some sleep," and with that, he leaves. Even the longest night is followed by dawn, and so this night comes to an end too. The iron door opens and closes continually as our menfolk come and go. Soldiers come in too occasionally, try to warm up a little. Outside, a blizzard is raging, and the thermometer stands at 15 degrees below zero. It's cold in our cellar too. We sit there with all our clothes on, and we have fur coats. There's no heat anywhere in the house now. The soldiers are mere boys, pale and trembling with cold and fright. They get ordered out into battle with brutal unconcern by the older officers. Poor children, they're not older than 16 or 18, and have already been dragged away from home into this mass murder. We try to rest, but the little baby yells so loud, and not one of us can sleep a wink. The next morning my father comes in, looking surprisedly pale. "Children," he says, "the water main has been hit. Go easy on what you use. There isn't any more water in the house." And with that he goes out, and we hear the men outside talking about the possibility of bringing in water from somewhere else. All the water in the water pipes throughout the house is drained out into basins and bathtubs. Down here in our air raid shelter, we have a big wooden barrel full of water for firefighting purposes. Are we going to have to drink this old, stale, smelly water? My younger sister looks at me inquiringly. I know she's thinking about her babe in arms. Ever since her husband disappeared, her own milk ceased flowing. From that time on, her babe was fed cooked food. But for that we have to have water, and the baby's bottle has to be thoroughly washed between feedings. I try to calm her fears by whispering, "It's snowing. We'll melt snow to make water." My husband hears me and calls out into the room outside the shelter, "Do you realize how little water you can get out of snow? The soldiers are taking all our water away. Unless we want to die of thirst, we'll have to get the water from somewhere. We could go for a long time without food, but without water, the heart is affected. We have to have water. There are 26 adults in the house, and we can't even cook beans because we don't have water. I'm going to try to find water somewhere in the neighborhood," he says, and he leaves. A short while later, he comes back and he reports, "The houses all along the street haven't any water either. We'll have to go out with buckets and carry the water from the next through street." "Please don't go." I say to him, "The machine gun fire was so terrible, and the cannon and airplanes are shooting continually too. You might get hit. Stay here and wait." My husband smiles. "Don't be a child. The First World War wasn't fought with cap pistols, and I still came through all right. God will not forsake us. Whatever is going to happen will happen anyway." I embrace him, and he disappears behind the cellar door. I go back into the cellar and I sit down. Quiet, cold, I wait. If it's God's will for my husband to come back, no bullet will hit him. If not, then it had to be that way. "Things are never bad, it's how you think about them," I heard a voice in my heart. I tell myself that hundreds and thousands and even millions of wives are sitting somewhere just as I am, praying for their husbands. These husbands are men like mine. The fact that my person loves his person so deeply is a manifestation of the self, which is the same in every person. When two people love each other, it means that they are experiencing the unity of the self in their consciousness. They feel they belong together because they are one in the self. I quietly tremble, and my heart still goes on trembling. "Keep calm," I tell it. "Steady does it. Just beat slowly and calmly. Let's breathe slowly, deeply, still deeper, and still deeper. Keep calm. We all of us have to put away the body someday. 100 years from now. It won't matter a bit who went first. Time and space are inventions of the intellect, but the spirit, the self, stands above the intellect, above all thoughts, above any concept of time and space. Breathe calmly and regularly, and think of nothing. Just be." I don't know how long I've been sitting there when the door opens again, and there's my husband with 10 quarts of water. Water, wonderful water. All of us, 26 people, have enough of it to last a day. I don't stand up and I don't throw myself around his neck. No, the great moments are always very simple. No sobbing, no tears, no big words. From where he stands portioning out the water, my husband glances over at me. Our eyes meet and we understand each other perfectly. I think to myself, reprieve. How long? We sit in the cellar in the darkness. Outside, the thunderous fire continues unremittingly. The earth trembles beneath, and we have to hold on to the bench below so that we are not thrown bodily off onto the floor. Cannon and tanks put up a steady barrage of fire. Airplanes roar past overhead. Bombs scream down and burst. The barrage of fire goes on and on. How long will we have to be sitting here in this cellar? By now I've lost all feeling for time. There is no day or night in the cellar. It's always dark. A dim little light is all we're allowed. We have no electricity for a long time, and we have to husband our supply of oil. Whenever the barrage of fire stops for half an hour, we step out into the other cellar room, and we have something to eat. We're lucky to have laid in a supply of emergency rations. But all too often we have to stop eating suddenly and rush back into the shelter, for our house is now getting shot at from the other side too. After every hit, we hear tiles and beams from the roof and the upper walls falling down onto the ceiling above us. We never know whether or not the next blast will cause the ceiling to cave in and bury us all alive. One day, a deafening blast blows a huge hole in the wall of the next room in the cellar. Fortunately, it's not our shelter. Later, during a lull in the barrage of fire outside, my husband goes out to see what's happened. A gigantic hole gapes in the cellar wall. The bright sunshine streaming through it makes us both blink. The tile and bricks lie all about, splinters of wood, bits of glass, everything covered with a heavy layer of dust. And on one end of the beam that sticks out of the general mess in confusion, a hen. A hen, also covered with a heavy layer of dust, stands there on one leg, just as calmly as if nothing had happened. She's one of Father's chickens, the only one left. Poor animal. What an awful opinion. It must have of us human beings. What an awful opinion it must have of us human beings. A few days later, the cook's art has turned the hen into a delicious soup. And while we're eating it, we discover how badly injured it was. Its left bone has been shot through, and part of the leg was missing, and that's why it stood there on one leg. With what stoic patience and indifference it bore up under its injury, not letting out so much as a squawk or a cackle to let us know how much it was suffering. Hour after hour we go on sitting in the shelter. Will the barrage of fire outside never stop? I hold my sister's little boy on my lap. My body is cold with fright, for even though a human being may face death with calm and quiet in his spirit, the body revolts. We don't know whether we may be hit by a bomb, buried alive, or die of thirst. The little boy begs me, "Tell me a story, Aunt Esther. Tell me a story." And I tell him stories by the hour to keep him quiet. He holds a toy automobile in his hand, and it's my job to wind it up again and again. And while he plays, he sings a little song. It sounds so familiar. What's the name of it? Oh, now I remember. It's the song the little pig sings. Who's afraid of the big bad wolf? In one of those Walt Disney films. Oh, how lucky I am that it's dark here in the cellar. Nobody can see that I've lost control of myself. and big soggy tears roll down over my cheeks. Oh God, you are present with us here. Your sacred message tells us all we mustn't be afraid. And Esther, tell me some more stories. Tell me what happened then. Why have you stopped telling the story? Asked little Peter. I hold the dear boy close to my heart, and I go on with the story. And the little goat's mother came back, and after seemingly endless hours of barrage of fire stops, just as he's been doing day after day, my husband goes out to get water. When he comes back, he waves to me. Esther, he says, all shaken up and in a voice trembling with emotion. I've just been upstairs in our flat, the beautiful furniture that you carved yourself, and all your lovely sculptured figures. A total wreck. The floor of one room is gone, and so are the walls of the other rooms. We haven't a home anymore. And the poor dear boy drops his head on my shoulder, crying and sobbing like a baby. I embrace him in his heavy winter coat. Don't cry. What really matters is that we're alive. We're still alive and uninjured in the midst of all this destruction. I can always make new figures. Don't worry about material things. Life stands over everything. He tries hard to control himself. I loved your carvings, the whole apartment so very much. And now everything's gone, all gone. No matter, even this hell will come to an end. Someday, I lay my head for a moment on his broad shoulder. We embrace each other tenderly, and then we go back into the dark shelter. This is no time to be sentimental. Bogar comes and he whispers, "What's happening? We heard the roof and the walls falling up there where your apartment is." I tell him what my husband has just told me. Bogar, the ever calm, ever smiling, gets all excited. I'm going up there. I have to salvage my slides and film on yoga. My life's work will be ruined if they're destroyed. I'm going up. Bogar, you mustn't. Enemy sharpshooters will pick you off in a minute. I won't let you go. My brother hears our conversation. I'll go up there with him. He says, I'll help him. Together they leave the cellar. We wait anxiously. Minute by minute goes by. A quarter of an hour, we're still waiting. Finally, the door opens and Bogar and my brother come in, dusty and dirty, but beaming with success. In their hands, they hold the precious boxes of slides and reels of film. My brother tells us the walls have all caved in, but the cupboard is still standing in the corner on the little piece of floor. We had to get over to the cupboard, but there wasn't any floor left to walk on, only an iron beam. So we had to watch out that the sharpshooters across the street didn't see us. So both of us lay down and crawled across the beam. Bogar dug out all the boxes from the cupboard and handed them over to me, one after another, and now we've got everything. We're all of us so happy that the two boys came back to us. Bogar hides his treasures in a corner so that no one can find them. And the next moment we're blasted almost out of our feet. A deafening blast shakes what's left of the house. Another attack. We hear the airplanes roar past overhead. Bombs, mines, shells, shrapnel, all sizes beat the ground and the walls all around us and over us. The explosions come closer and closer, and after each one of them we hear tiles and bricks and rubble tumbling down overhead. The barrage of fire is so continuous, it sounds as if it might be some gigantic cosmic sewing machine. Any moment, the next shell may burst through the ceiling overhead, our last protection, and blow us all to kingdom come. We sit there, mute and cold, in this horrible anxiety, in deathly fright and fear of death. How long can the walls hold? Then a gigantic blast, so powerful, the whole cellar floor dances beneath us, And my father's chambermaid suddenly starts to scream with nervous shock. The other women servants start screaming too. And I jump up and I yell at the top of my lungs, "Quiet, quiet! God is here, God is here!" Explosion follows explosion so loud that they can hardly hear my voice. But I keep on shouting. I just have to shout the top of my lungs. God is here. Let all of us, everyone, think only of God. Nothing else, only of God. God be with us. God, God, God. And one by one, the others join me as we repeat together. God is here. God, God, God. None of us knows how long this has gone on. Little by little, the pandemonium outside lessens, and the blasts become less frequent, and at last it's quiet outside, and we can hear the soldiers dragging something heavy. I go out to have a look. On the stairs are bodies lying motionless. On the floor is blood. I recognize several of the young soldiers. Only an hour ago they were seeking warmth with us in the shelter, telling us about their homes and families far away. Oh, their poor parents, waiting in vain for their children to come home. My son, where can the poor boy be now? In what department of hell? Then we grab a bite to eat. We know we have to take advantage of every moment of calm. We have to strengthen our body's resistance as long as we have anything to eat. 2 men go out to get water. How long have we been sitting here in this shelter? Weeks have gone by while we've been in this barrage of hellfire. My husband reminisces. In Duberdo, in the First World War, we were caught in a barrage of fire too, but every 48 hours we were relieved. People thought a person's nerves couldn't stand any more than that. I never dreamed I would one day be sitting through an unending barrage, together with women and children for several weeks, and without any relief. We all sit there in our furs and heavy coats. None of us has been able to take off a stitch of clothing ever since we came down into this dungeon. Little Peter is lying in my arms. With one hand, I hang on to his little suitcase containing money, my jewelry, and a box of cakes by way of food supply for the babe in arms in case we have to flee. We are all ready, all of us, to jump. The next villa next to ours was burnt out with flamethrowers. My husband has given orders to everyone to be ready to flee at a moment's notice. We don't know when the enemy may set fire to our house and drives us out with flamethrowers. But flee where? We haven't the vaguest idea. Only out and away from here. Our neighbor and his son were both picked off with sharpshooters while they were trying to escape from their burning house. Only his wife came out alive. She crawled and she wiggled on her stomach all the way over to the 4th house down the street where the people took her in. We wait in readiness, my younger sister with her babe in arms, my snowy-haired father wrapped in his big fur coat, my elder sister's family, my brother, our servants, all tense, all holding our most precious possessions, all ready to jump and run. And then, for a little while, it's quiet outside. We'd like to get some sleep. My nerves are burning. My head is ready to split. I close my eyes, and I try to withdraw my consciousness and fall asleep. But then the baby starts to scream in its shrill, penetrating voice. My sister tries to quiet it, but it keeps on crying and screaming. Without a moment's intermission, I take over the child from my sister, and I try everything I can think of. But it keeps on crying, desperately. I hand the child back to my sister, and it goes on crying. In the darkness, Bogar stumbles over to my sister, picks up the child, holds it gently in his arms, and starts humming a tune from his faraway home. It's a tune of his countrymen that they used to control snakes. The child quiets down instantly. As calm returns to the cellar, we all of us fall asleep. sitting there just as we are. Only Bogar is awake, holding the child in his arms and humming his exotic little tune. More days go by, or are they weeks? We don't even bother to ask anymore. Behind a protective wall in the garden, my husband scrapes together some snow, brings the pail downstairs, and shaves in the next room in the cellar. He refused to give up his habits. All the other men have bushy beards. Only my husband and Bogar keep on shaving day by day in the midst of this hell. Then my husband sits down beside us, and a new attack begins, and we endure the torture for hours on end. My sister brings her baby's bottle and gives him his meal. 4 times a day she goes upstairs to her flat and cooks for her baby despite the hail of bullets flying around. After her child has had its fill, she comes to me and she asks, just as she asks every day, "Do you think it's over yet?" "No," I whisper back. "I just feel it isn't over." A moment later, a mini bursts directly over our head. Once again, we hear tiles and bricks, and mortar and wood falling. The shelter ceiling has held up under the blast, but how much longer? We sit there quietly, and I ask God within me, shall I get ready to die? My horoscope says I'm going to die in the crash of a building. Is it now? Am I going to die, or shall I go on fighting to live? Then suddenly, amidst the darkness, I behold a vision, a tiny little hill, and on it a candle, a tiny one like a Christmas tree candle, burning with a tiny flame. And then before my eyes, the little hill begins to grow, turning into a big hill, covered with emerald green grass, and the tiny candle grows into a torch, burning with a bright, strong flame. The vision disappears, but I know I am not going to die yet. I'm going to have this be my torch. I'm going to bring people light, light, light. At night, the baby cries incessantly until Bogar picks it up and lulls it to sleep. And while we're trying to sleep, a mine explodes nearby. And afterwards, I feel the ice-cold air come into our shelter. The men jump up and see what's happened. The cellar wall has caved in, leaving a gaping hole. We all think of the coming attack. We wait. I whisper to my younger sister, "Now it's the end. In the morning, our villa will be taken." "Yes," she answers, "I think so too, or else we'll all die." My husband whispers, "It's 7 weeks to the day that we've been sitting here in this shelter." Strangely enough, the enemy cannon has ceased firing. No bombs are falling. We hear only continuous machine gun fire. Sitting next to me, my husband whispers into my ear, "That means the infantry is quite near us. They've stopped using field guns in order not to hit their own troops. Enemy soldiers may walk in any minute." In the afternoons, I go out to see where Father is. As I step out of the shelter and look out through the door of the house, I see foreign soldiers running towards the burnt-out villa next door. "Father, Father, and all the rest of you," I scream. As I run back, "The enemy is here." We all rush back into this shelter just as the enemy soldiers lunge through the door, their rifles at the ready. Deathly silence. We all look at each other for a seemingly endless moment. It's as if time itself were standing still. All the soldiers are dressed in broad white coats. Outside, everything is covered in snow. The soldiers look like children playing in a Christmas pageant. Then, with a word we cannot understand, their leader points to the women. We understand we must move to the right, and we do so. Then another incomprehensible word, and he points to the men, who all have to leave immediately with one of the soldiers. No time for fond farewells. The men are gone, and we women remain alone with the foreign soldiers, with their submachine guns in readiness. They poke into every corner of the cellar, looking for any of our troops who might be hiding there. One young soldier steps over to the pram where the baby is sleeping. Even as he looks at it, tears come into his eyes. With infinite tenderness, he says in a strange word in a foreign language, "Nevertheless, we understand. A little baby." And then he looks at us and he points in the direction of his homeland, telling us in sign language that he too has a little baby at home. I feel somewhat consoled as I note that these soldiers are loving, kind-hearted human beings too. Now, an officer comes in and sits down on a chair and tells us in a European language, "We won't harm you. We are stormtroops, sons of people who now belong to an exterminated class. But watch out, we have to go on. Behind us, there'll come soldiers of another kind. They are not like us. Watch out." Late in the afternoon, the shooting begins again. But now the fire is coming from the country's own soldiers. They want to recapture our house. And again they sit in the dark cellar and they listen to the horrible fighting going on at close quarters in the street outside. All of a sudden there's another deafening explosion, followed by a stream of cold air coming in on us. The explosion has blasted open the heavy iron shutter of the cellar window. Through the open window, bullets rain in on us like hailstones. We all jump to one side, flattening ourselves against the walls. But this way, we are unable to move. In this situation, every one of our lives is in danger. A single step can mean death. The heavy iron window shutter must be closed. I look about me. All the women and the children seek refuge by flattening themselves against the wall near the window. For the moment any one of us shows herself in front of the window, a shower of bullets rains in upon us. This situation is untenable. The shutter must be closed. I feel a strange chill within me. My every nerve is cold, frozen, so cold I can't feel myself at all. Afraid, I ask myself? No. Who is there to be afraid within me when I feel as if I didn't even exist? I only know that I am the one who must close the iron shutter. Nevertheless, I observe myself curiously. What does it feel like to be in such a position? What does a person experience? How does nature react within the human being when we involuntarily have to be a hero? Standing in one corner of the cellar is a heavy walking stick with a curved handle. Lying flat on the floor, I crawl slowly, cautiously over to the cane. Then, grasping its lower end, I crawl back towards the window. While I am executing this maneuver, a weird thought flashes through my head. The candidates in the pyramid had to pass a test of defying death. Maybe I'm now passing this same test here, in this shelter. Maybe this is all only a dream during my initiation in the pyramid. While I crawl back cautiously to the window, my intellect replies, yes, the candidates in the pyramid had it easy. They knew they were only undergoing a test in their initiation. But these bullets aren't dreams, they really kill. How many poor young soldiers have already lost their lives right here? Nevertheless, the window shutter must be closed, and for that very reason. Kneeling beneath the window, holding the cane in readiness, I suddenly jump up and poke out my arm and the cane through the window. Then, noting that the iron shutter has been blasted open, I find I must extend my head and shoulder through the window in order to reach the edge of the shutter with the cane's curved handle. I have to reach out and stretch until I feel as if my whole body were getting longer. Finally, I have the shutter and I draw it slowly, surely inward. Now my sisters jump up to help, pull the heavy iron shutter into place and bolt it firmly closed. Well done. All very simple, no excitement, no theatrics, no histrionics. And yet, how strange. Up till now, the sharpshooters across the street poured a hail of fire into our window at the slightest sign of life, and yet, throughout my whole maneuver to close the iron shutter, they didn't fire a single shot. Maybe they were being prevented from shooting, or simply didn't want to shoot because they saw I was a woman? Aunt Esther begs little Peter, tell me another story. And so I go on telling stories by the hour. The next day we women had to flee from our bombed-out house. The intervening night was one of indescribable horror. I can hardly believe that such things really happen. The conquest of a country is like the meeting of male and female power in a violent marriage. One country conquers another and forces its way into the body of another. Blood flows, individual inhabitants die like the cells of the ravaged body, and yet new life comes forth from this meeting, a new world, a new creation. The meeting is cruel and violent, just as the creation of a new life always is. But nature only looks forward into the future, willingly sacrificing countless individual cells and beings in order to reach its goal of bringing forth new life. And new life does come forth, both on the spiritual and the material level, from the intimate meeting of two countries, that of the conqueror and that of the conquered. Out of the marriage of two countries, a new civilization arises. The cells of the bodies of these two countries meet and mingle, bringing forth children with some of the characteristics of both races. Nature creates hybrid races and individuals who represent a transition, softening and bridging over the hard boundaries between races and nations. It was my fate to learn this fact that night in the air raid shelter of that bombed-out house. I was forced to look on and see the violent marriage of two nations, very cruel, and causes many individual tragedies. It was Ima who saved me from the fate that overtook almost all the women in the house that night, when one of the soldiers started to drag me from my seat in the corner of the shelter, forcing me to follow him. I told him, in a pidgin version of his own language, I, mother, son in war, you have mother at home too. Please go away. In the half-drunk eyes of the poor young man whose body had been poisoned with storm pills, there flashed an expression of understanding. I saw that he was forced to think of his own mother, and then with a gesture of frustration and rage, he pushed me back under the bench and stormed out of the cellar. The next morning, we felt an inner command to flee from the bombed-out house. We felt the guidance of higher power. For reasons beyond our own comprehension, it saved us from the fate of awaiting all women, without exception, in the ruins of our house. Everything happened as if in a chaotic dream. After 5 weeks in darkness, we step out suddenly into bright sunshine, so bright our eyes can hardly stand it. I cast a backward glance at our big, beautiful villa, a pile of rubble, topped off with broken beams pointing their splintered ends skyward. Then we run across the street, picking our way between the corpses and the rubble over to the steps. My sister carries her babe in arms. As I watch, I see her plunge down the steps in the deep snow. I run to her side and help her, then fall over myself with the little boy that I'm holding by the hand. Under the snow are wire obstacles, and while we're trying to climb over with the children, an elderly soldier of the enemy army lifts the little boy over the wire barrier and then helps the rest of us over. The women and the children, one after another. I am the last. We cannot talk to the soldier. We wouldn't understand each other, but we look into each other's eyes, and I give him a hearty handshake in sincere appreciation. He reciprocates the handshake. Then we run on, zigzagging back and forth in search of cover from the mines which are still exploding, and from the bullets falling all around us. The children yell at the top of their lungs. The snow is too deep for little Peter, so with all my might and main, I drag him along the stretched out flat behind me because he wasn't even able to walk. From time to time we stop under a terrace and catch our breath to warm the children's hands by blowing on them, and then we run on, scarcely knowing which way we're going, driven onward or led on by an inner power. And it's like a dream to be taken into our house at long last, where a good-natured officer of the enemy army protects us from violence at the hands of his own comrades. As we get to be good friends, he tells us, "Mama, watch out. 1 good soldier, 10 bad soldiers. Not all the men in our army would give you protection the way I'm doing. Watch out when I get orders to move on." Yes, we know all enemy soldiers are not so humane. We have the experiences of our first night behind us, and we'll never forget them. And the men have disappeared, all except Father, whom we have soon found again, calmly, without excitement, paying no attention to the cannonade going on around us. The old gentleman walked through the scene of mass murder, and while everyone else was being robbed of everything he possessed, fur, coat, gloves, money, watch, fountain pen, and everything else one can carry on his person, my father arrived safe and sound in the home of an old friend, without a single soldier's having so much as touched him. His powerful radiation even affected the enemy soldiers, and kept them away from him. Then a few days later there was a knock on the door of the strange room in this strange house where 14 people, soldiers, refugees, and we women and children are living. A knock on the door, and Bogar stands before us in tattered clothes with bleeding feet. After all he's been through, it's a miracle he's still alive. Neighbors told him of the direction in which they saw us flee. He has found us again. A few days later, my brother comes back also in tatters. He too has traveled several hundred kilometers. Somewhere he found himself 2 shoes, both of them for the left foot, and he wears them both with his accustomed dignity. He's alive. That's all that matters. As the days go by, I still have no news of my husband, and I can't seem to get the thought out of my head that I've seen him one day in a vision, lying helpless in the snow beside the road. What could have happened to him? After long weeks of waiting in vain, I finally find my husband, gravely injured, in the house of a good-hearted farmer. My vision wasn't wrong. Weeks go by, months go by. We're hungry, don't know where our next meal is coming from. But one day, at long last, the war is over. We try to make some rooms in the ruins of our family house inhabitable. Bogar and I work day and night to get something to eat in time of terrible famine. My husband is forced to lie flat on his back for many long months until he recovers sufficiently to be able to walk about cautiously with 2 canes. How fortunate! I am a sculptress. I do bricklaying. I take doors out of the remnants of walls and I move them to where we need them. We put together window frames. Having no glass, we cover them with heavy wrapping paper. Digging in the rubble with our 10 fingernails, we bring out a few usable pots and pans, plus some bent and beaten silverware. Bogar and I managed to borrow a cart and use it to bring home several hundredweight of coal, pulling all the way like 2 strong horses. Downhill, we find it hard to keep the cart from running away from us. Uphill, it takes all our pushing and pulling to get it to the top, where we reach level street again and can trot along lightly and gaily. Then we clean up the remnants of our furniture, using miscellaneous odd bits to make new pieces. We keep on hammering and nailing things together until at last we're able to reopen our yoga school in the ruins of our old home. Bogar gives lessons in the physical exercises he learned from Mentipah, while I teach what I learned in Egypt from Ptahhotep. Months go by again, and little by little, the problem of finding food becomes somewhat less acute. Our pupils who have relatives living in the country bring us an occasional handful of flour, a few potatoes, eggs, and once in a while even a little bit of butter. But I still have no news from my son. Then one day, after a year and a half of waiting, someone rings our doorbell. I open the door, and Ima stands before me. I would have thought, in such cases, mother and son would fall about each other's necks with loud cries and sobs, but no. I look at him in surprise, and then we embrace each other quietly and earnestly. I draw a deep breath of relief. He is alive, not crippled. Only a scar on his beautiful high forehead shows that he's been through an airplane crash. But still, I am deeply dismayed. I know Ima well enough to know that there is no room for him in this country, where vulgarity, brutality, stupidity, and utter chaos are the order of the day, and without jeopardizing life and limb excessively. A person can experience such conditions only if he preserves his inner peace, his perfect trust in God, and keeps silent. But Ima won't keep silent. He doesn't understand that we're not in the temple now, where love and truth and unselfishness prevail, and where everyone may speak his opinion freely without risk of being understood. Ima won't be able to get along in this world. He won't tolerate injustice, and he'll want to fight against the infernal spirit prevailing here now. Apparently he has forgotten who he is, and yet he has retained his high-mindedness, honesty and courage, and expects the sons of men to display these same virtues. He insists on believing in people, and he has crowded off into the unconscious part of his being, his indomitable faith in God. Poor Ima has to experience one disappointment after another. Why does he repress his faith in God? Why does he refuse to believe in God? That's the reason why he's lost his self-confidence. I can see that he must have experienced a serious mental crack-up, but when and where? And why do I have the strange and oppressing feeling that I have been the cause of this mental rupture? A horrible disappointment. I know that somewhere, sometime, he's lost his faith because of me, But in vain I seek the reason. One thing I know with absolute certainty is that it's up to me to lead him back to God, and that's why he has become my son. I must awaken his self-confidence, which is identical with confidence in God, and make him conscious again of this confidence, because I was to blame for his having lost it. I must realize that the deep love and confidence that he has in me is only a projection of the profound confidence in God he has in his unconscious part of his soul. He must come to realize that he has to learn to recognize and to love God in every person. The person is only the outer cover, a mask, through which God manifests himself. He must learn that what he loves in any person and what he finds good, beautiful, and true in anyone is God, not the person. And that applies to me too, whom he loves. I know it more than anyone else here on earth. It's up to me to lead him back to his love of God, to lead him back to God. He must come to realize that he loves God in me too, and that my person is only an instrument through which God manifests himself in the form of maternal love. Ima has yet to learn that in every person who loves him, it is really God who loves him, and not the person. When he realizes these things, he will understand me and everyone else, and even himself better. Then he won't experience any more disappointments. And there comes a night in which my one and only child, the person I love most on earth, is living in an unheated room during an unusually cold winter, when the thermometer has been dragging along at 20 below zero for week after week. My one and only child doesn't even have a warm blanket and has scarcely anything to eat. I could easily provide a heated room for him. I could give him food and everything else he needs. But I know I must not. I know it's more important for him not to lose his soul than his body. Out of love for him, I must be cruel. I kneel in the darkness in my bed, and I speak to God. You be with him, O God, and I let him find himself and you again. Let him find the way that leads to you, and let him never deviate from it. Awaken him. Awaken yourself in him, O God, for you are also dwelling in him, and you must awaken in him so that he may awaken. For my strength is inadequate. He must become conscious. Unless he does so, he's lost. And you know the one and only path for him to follow in order to recognize you, O God, my God, in himself. You know why he feels he has been forsaken by everyone, why he's convinced that even I have forsaken him. He has to feel disappointed in everyone. He has to give up hope in everyone in order to find you, in order to become conscious in you, conscious of himself. You know, O God, that I don't see any other possibility of saving him. I cannot, and I must not show my love for him anymore. He must find you by his own efforts. I am only a weak human being, my Lord, but you are God. Love itself. You love him more than I can love him. You, O God, are always with him. Love him now with your divine love, now when I must be cruel. Take care of him. Keep him from losing his health during this present struggle of his, while he's going through this school, you know that he's sinning against his health because he has no confidence in himself anymore. Because in his unconscious, he would like to die, to kill himself. Take care of him. Open his spiritual eyes. Don't forsake him. Don't forsake him. Don't forsake him. And so I go on, night after night. One night, as I'm kneeling in my bed, in the darkness again, preparing to speak to God about my child, something strange happens. To my great amazement, it begins to get light about me. It gets lighter and lighter, and in the growing brightness, I see a remarkable landscape. A high mountain with a steep, stony, narrow path leading up to it. I know this path leads to the goal, to God. Without hesitating, I start to follow it. The path leads through friendly countryside. Higher and higher, I climb untiringly until the charming green landscape lies behind me and I gradually reach the inhospitable region of the high mountains. The pathway gets even steeper, narrower, stonier, but I climb with astonishing ease, so light as if I were gliding. The inhabited territory lies behind me. My horizon widens. I see everything far below me, but there is no time to look around, and I go on, and after many curves, the narrow pathway ends in front of a short stairway with 7 steps, each step twice as high as the one before. Under a crystal blue sky, I stand there all alone in front of these 7 steps, and I know I must climb them. With a deep sigh and faith in the power of the Creator, the power which in my case has miraculously gone undiminished and even increased as I have climbed this long path. I walk up to the steps. The first one is low. I must conquer the weight of my body. In order to lift myself up onto it, I succeed easily. The second step is somewhat higher and awakens the resistance of my body. I have long ago conquered the forces of my body, and so this step too causes me no trouble. The third is noticeably higher. In order to conquer this one, I have to conquer my feelings. As I become master of my feelings, I am on the 3rd step. As I face the 4th step, which is surprisingly high, thoughts of doubt overcome me. How will I be able to climb it? Have I enough strength? And then I realize that my doubts are weakening me, paralyzing me. But doubt is a thought, so I must conquer my thoughts in order to master doubt. Thanks to my long training and my exercises in the temple, I know what I have to do. I gather all the strength of my soul. I have absolute faith in God, and I think of nothing else. And behold, as my thoughts disappear, my doubts disappear too, and I am on the 4th step. Curiously, I feel I have grown much larger while I've been climbing these steps. Each time I've gone up a step, I've grown some more, and now I'm much larger than I was at the beginning. Now I face the 5th step, which, even though I've grown a great deal, is so high that I can only get up using both hands and both feet. And as I pull myself up with great difficulty, I suddenly find, to my great surprise, that I have no body anymore. Everything in me, or about me, that was material has disappeared, and I am invisible spirit. The 6th step is very, very high, and a very new difficulty awaits me. I have no body, no hands with which to hang on, and no feet with which to pull myself up How am I supposed to get up there? I look about me for some way to do it. And as I turn around, I suddenly see the whole world spread out before me, country after country, city after city, looking like toys, with houses and countless people living in them. Infinite love for all of them seizes me, and I am pained to think of all the people who would have to travel the long, laborious pathway of recognition, of all the innumerable people feeling their way forward in the darkness, imprisoned in their own selfishness, just as I once was. And, wonder of wonders, the moment universal love floods my chest, I am raised up and I find myself on the 6th step. Now I stand before the last and the highest step of all. It is just as high as I am. I long so much to get up there, and this wish fills my whole being. In vain, I just don't know what to do. I have no hands, no feet, nor muscular strength of the body with which to pull myself up. But I must get up there at any price. Up on top, I will find God, and I am determined to see him face to face. I stand waiting. I stand waiting, but nothing happens. As I look around me, I find, to my great surprise, I'm not alone. At this very moment, a being similar to myself reaches the top step, the 6th step, and begs me to help him to the 7th. I understand his tremendous desire, and, forgetting my own longing to reach the 7th step, I try to help him reach his goal. But the very moment I forget my own wish, I suddenly find that I am up on the top of the 7th step. I don't know how, and my companion is no longer there. He has disappeared without leaving a trace. He was an illusion who helped me forget my own last self-centered wish. And as long as I wanted to raise myself up, my own person, I would never be able to conquer the step that was as high as I myself. I have arrived. Quicker than a flash of lightning, I see the form of a heavenly being, woven of dazzling light, my complementary half. His irresistible attraction draws me to him, and full of delight and fulfillment, I melt into complete union with him in his heart. I realize he was always I, and I always he, the dualistic projected image of my divine true self. In this dualistic state, I always faced God as being separate from myself, and I felt him as you. Now, in paradisical unity, I feel that this invisible power I have, so far always called God, will become myself in this very moment. A disc woven of fire begins to rotate around me, and in its immovable axis in my spinal column, my true self, I am dwelling, and I feel my spinal column burning like a white hot bow, like a bridge made up of the current of life, radiating brilliant light through 7 centers of force, vitalizing my body. Then, beyond all concept of time, I simultaneously see the endlessly long chain of the different forms of life in which I have been incarnated throughout ages and eons of time, as I traveled the long pathways of development from my first fall out of paradisical unity up to my present moment. I see that my countless lives have been, are, and will be inseparably linked with the lives of the same spirits. From the events of past lives, new relationships emerge, new ties, new developments, all supplementing each other and fitting together perfectly like the little stones in a big mosaic. I recognize the threads linking me with my complementary half, with Ptahhotep, with Autothus, with Ima and Bogar, and many, many other people. I see clearly how these threads have bound us all together for ages of time, how souls more advanced than we are have helped us, how we have helped each other, and those less advanced in the great task of the spiritualization of the earth, in developing our consciousness in matter, in the body. The experiences we bring each other in all these lives help expand and deepen the consciousness in our body, while the bodies we inhabit get progressively more spiritual, more beautiful. The matter composing our various forms of manifestation become ever more elastic, more responsible to the will and the radiations of the spirit, until finally the body becomes an obedient servant of the self, no longer isolating or obscuring a single ray of light from the spirit. I understand the secret of the pyramid, for now I have become a pyramid myself, only using matter, the body, as a firm footing, but constantly manifesting divinity. Then everything about me, the earth, sky, the entire universe, all merge in a single gigantic sea of fire. Huge flames encompass me. For a moment I feel as if I, with the entire cosmos, were being destroyed. Flashes of lightning crack and snap through my veins, through the entire being, as the fire burns me, and then suddenly everything changes. The fire is no longer consuming me, but I myself am this heavenly fire, penetrating everything, animating everything, consuming everything. A flood of light surrounds me. But this flood of light is arising within myself. I am the source of this light and of everything else that is. The earth has no effect on me anymore. Its attraction, which held me in its fetters, ceases. I am floating in nothingness. My being has no limitations anymore. 7 a.m. now, the one who attracts everything. But nothing ties me down anymore. Nothing attracts me anymore. I seek those whom I have loved, for I know they couldn't be destroyed, but I seek them in vain in the nothingness about me. In the emptiness, there is nothing but myself. So I have to turn my attention inward. Behold, even as I do, I realize that everyone and everything is living in me. The universe is in me, for everything that is living in me, everything that is, I am. In everything that I love myself. And suddenly I realize that everything that I've always believed I didn't love was what I had not yet recognized within myself. Now that I recognize myself perfectly, I love everything and everyone equally, for I am one with them. I am I in everything, in all. I am fulfillment, life, radiant, eternal, immortal being. There is no longer any struggle, any regret, any suffering, no decay, no end, no death. In all that is born, I, the immortal, begin a new form of life. And in all that dies, I, the immortal, withdraw into myself, back into the eternal, creative, divine self. I realize that time and space exist only on the periphery of the created world, which is like a disk rotating with dizzying speed, but I, within myself, am timeless, spaceless, eternity. And while I am resting within myself, my eternal being fills space and everything living in it. I am the only reality. I am life. I am that I am. I rest within myself and I feel infinite peace. But in this peace, a call reaches me and compels me to return to my deserted body. I turn the searchlight of my consciousness onto it and I recognize the voice speaking to me, to my being, the well-known, dearly beloved voice of my master, Ptahhotep. He is calling me back, and I step out of the heavenly self and I put on the garment of my personal ego once again, and I bring with me the consciousness of who I am. I am a human being again, but in my heart I carry the divine self that has become conscious in me, God. And from now on, this divine self will be acting through my person. And slowly, I open my eyes. My glance meets the deep blue heavenly eyes of my master, Ptahhotep. His eyes radiate the same light, the same love, the same peace I have just experienced during this blissful state of my initiation. The same light, the same love, the same peace I now carry in my own heart. I can't bring my lips to utter a sound. I am still unable to find the connection between myself and my body, but I don't need to speak, for I know my master's every thought and wish. We are in spiritual unity, in God, all one. He lays his right hand upon my heart, and gradually I feel life returning to my body. I draw a deep breath, and the renewed, regenerated stream of life flows through my numb limbs. My heart beats vigorously again. Gradually, I regain control of my body. Ptahhotep and his deputy help me sit up and slowly get out of the coffin. I stand insecurely on my feet. Ptahhotep and the other high priest take me by the hands and lead me out of the niche where the initiation coffin stands. Then I see that all the initiates of the temple, priests and priestesses, are assembled in the great hall where the Ark of the Covenant is kept. Expectantly, they are all waiting for me, and as I come out, led by the two high priests, they greet me with the sacred word and secret greeting of the initiates. In the circle of the resurrected, I stand there like a newborn babe. I have the same body as before, and yet I am a new being. I find myself in a new world. I no longer see everything from the outside, but simultaneously the inner being, the core about which the external form is built, the center for which the external form merely serves as a manifestation. I stand in the circle of the resurrected. My inner being vibrates in the tone of the sacred word, the divine mantra, and with the aid of this indescribable vibration, in this magic tone, I experience in my own physical consciousness the divine unity of the self with all these initiates initiates and with the entire universe. We have all come, priests and priestesses. They have all come, priests and priestesses, to greet me after my resurrection and to express divine infinite love. My father, Ptahhotep, is here too. He's wearing the plain white robe of the initiates. Then there's the soft-spoken master, Mentupa, and my dear brother, Ima. The moment I see his noble countenance, his eyes light up with a smile, and I remember all my dream pictures, the most difficult tests of the initiation, the test of renunciation, giving up everything, the test of cruel love. Ima, you dearly beloved, do you know that in my initiation vision, you were the reason for my passing the most difficult test of all? The majestic figure of an elderly priestess now moves forward from the circle of the initiates. She hands Ptahhotep a robe, and together they invest me with the priestly clothing. Then she stands beside Ptahhotep with a headdress, the sign of initiates, and he sets the band of gold upon my head. In front, the circlet of gold bears the head of a serpent, symbol of the procreative energy of life, transformed and spiritualized. Now at last, I can wear this insignia, not only as a queen, but also as an initiate. Now I am a priestess, in the lowest degree of priesthood. It's up to me to reach the higher degrees, step by step, until I am worthy to be permitted to use the staff of life. Ptahhotep steps over to my side, lays his hand upon my head, and blesses me, and then he takes my hand and leads me to the initiates. First, of course, to the second high priest. He too lays his hand upon me and blesses me, and then I step over before my dear father and feel him through his hand pouring out all the love in his heart upon me. And so one by one, according to their rank, I step before each of the initiates and receive his blessing. And at last I stand in front of Ima, who received his initiation. Shortly before me, he blesses me too, but I feel his hand tremble. Then Ptahhotep leads me to the Ark of the Covenant. I kneel before it for the first time in my life. I am permitted to lay my hands upon it. In every drop of blood, I feel the fiery power flowing out of the Ark of the Covenant into my body. I breathe deeply into my innermost being, and now with my unconsciousness awake inside my body, I experience the fulfillment of paradisical unity, the omnipotence and the omniscience in God. I understand and experience the meaning of being. Wherever I turn the searchlight of my consciousness, there is clarity and light. In radiant brilliance, the last and highest truths of life stand before my eyes. I experience the absolute, omnipotence that comes through the guidance of divine creative power in myself. Ptahhotep again takes me by the hand and leads me back through the rooms through which we came here, back through the passageways, through the stone door back into the temple. The initiates come after us. In the temple, all the neophytes are waiting, and it's my turn to officiate as priestess for the first time. I stand before the altar with Ptahhotep, while all the neophytes come one after another to receive my blessing. Upon each I place my right hand, and each accepts my blessing in deep silence. Finally, the children of the neophyte school approach, and among them my little adopted son, Bogar. He kneels before me and he looks at me devotedly. Then he bows his head and receives my blessing. Oh, Bogar, my little Bogar, what a strange role you played in my initiation vision. This ends my first priestly office in the temple. In the little cell I used during my preparations for initiation, Ptahhotep leaves me alone, and after the prescribed time of complete rest, I am again allowed to eat light foods and beverages, and for a while I sit on the couch, unable to shake off the effect of the strange visions that I experienced during my initiation. What horrible pictures! How lucky I am to wake up and to find these dreams are not real. How was it possible for me to carry such pictures within myself and thus come to dream them? They just can't be real. It's absolutely impossible for people to be so depraved and degraded as to kill each other with such cruelty and with such hellish instruments. The horrible seller of my dream, and still I know the eternal law that a creature can only imagine pictures which could actually exist in reality. Whatever a person can imagine can materialize. If this were not so, he wouldn't be able to imagine it. But these horrible pictures, these gigantic birds piloted by the sons of man, flying overhead with fearful roar, often climbing so high that one can't even see them anymore, and throwing down some devil eggs upon the earth. I saw with my own eyes how these eggs destroyed everything within a wide radius of where they were hitting the ground. With deafening blasts, they brought down whole houses. How is that possible? And why should the sons of men put their intellect in the services of fiendish senselessness? And what strange apparatus I saw and used in my initiation visions. I heard human beings, voices speaking from tremendous distances, and others heard my voice in the same way. How Ema would laugh if I were to tell him that people could communicate over long distances by means of such devices instead of using the much simpler method of mental telepathy. He would surely want me to give him a thorough explanation of the construction of such a device, and that I couldn't do, just as I couldn't give a description of the inner construction of the staff of life or the Ark of the Covenant in a way that would enable anyone to make such a device. Yet nevertheless, they do exist. And in the same way, I know that this telephone device can exist. And Ema, you, pure, true servant of God, in my initiation, you dream, you too had to pilot such a big iron bird. You and all the handsome, healthy young men, you had to go out in great numbers, as if bewitched, to kill others, and to allow yourself to be killed. How could you go along with this madness? How could you obey such inhumane orders? And who was the burning man who was my husband in my initiation dream? How close he was to my heart. He was my best friend, and still he didn't know who I am, and I don't know who he is. And so I experience each individual picture of my initiation dreams again. I recognize all the people who were my parents, brothers, sisters, friends, and enemies in my current life here in Egypt. And also, I often really have to smile about the curious relationships. Evening comes and the day ends with a feast in which all the priests and priestesses and neophytes take part. The pharaoh is present too, and since the relatives of the new initiate are permitted to attend an initiation feast, my dear old Menu is here with the rest of us. And as I step into the garden, she runs towards me as fast as her heavy body will carry her. Beaming with joy, she embraces me and she sobs with relief of her pent-up anxiety. Oh, how good it is to see you alive again. Tell me, will you still love me now that you are a priestess? Will you still love me? Can I go on living with you? I stroke her dear old head and I calm her fears. Menu, naturally I love you. Of course you can stay with me. Now even greater love binds me to you.